On Christmas Eve 2022, Dan, a former sergeant-turned-teacher, was supposed to help his wife Emmy and daughter Muri prepare for their party. Instead, he found himself on the phone, hoping to secure his dream job at a lab. Sadly, his application was rejected. Feeling frustrated, Dan stepped outside to clear his mind. Later, he sat down with Muri on the sofa and reminded her about the importance of doing what others won't. The family settled in to watch a big soccer game, but the event took a shocking turn when a strange cloud of smoke and electricity appeared on the field. People emerged from it, revealing themselves to be soldiers led by Lieutenant Hart. They claimed to be from the year 2051, warning of an alien invasion by creatures called white spikes that had nearly wiped out humanity. The soldiers had come back to recruit fighters from the present to join their desperate battle. In the following months, nations worldwide sent soldiers to aid the future. But the demand for reinforcements never ceased. Only a fraction of those who went returned, creating a grim outlook. When the ranks of trained soldiers dwindled, governments began conscripting civilians, sparking protests against being forced into a seemingly distant and deadly conflict. Dan continued teaching, though his students, except for Martin, who had a passion for volcanoes, struggled to stay engaged, questioning the value of learning when their lives were at risk. Just then, Dan received a life-altering message on his phone. He had been drafted into the fight. Dan arrived at the military facility and underwent a series of tests to confirm his suitability for combat due to his projected death within 7 years. During these examinations, he felt a sudden pain in his arm and discovered a metallic device attached to it. He was informed that this device would monitor him during his mission and automatically bring him back after 7 days. Feeling unsettled by this revelation, Dan hurried to tell Emmy, who immediately suggested they escape. However, Dan explained that evading the government's tracking device was impossible. Emmy then proposed seeking help from Dan's estranged father, James. Despite Dan's doubts and their troubled history, he reluctantly visited James for assistance. Their meeting quickly soured as James suspected Dan of being a government informant, leading to a tense argument. Unable to have the device removed, Dan returned home, feeling defeated, but reassured his family that he would return safely. The next day, he resumed training at the center, where he befriended Charlie, a scientist, and Dorian, a seasoned soldier on his third deployment. Their training covered basic firearms handling, first aid, and an in-depth briefing on the principles of time travel. The trainers likened the time link to navigating between two fixed points, like rafts on a river, restricting travel to 2022 and 2051. As they relaxed in the barracks, preparing for their imminent mission, an alarm suddenly sounded, signaling their departure was imminent. The trainees were initially confused, as they had expected a full week of training, but were quickly informed that the urgency of the situation demanded immediate deployment. As they gathered, the time link activated, enveloping them in a cloud similar to the one they had seen on the soccer field, transporting them into the future. Their intended destination was Miami Beach, but a glitch in the control room caused them to materialize above the city instead. The sudden arrival caused fatalities as they crashed onto a building, but some managed to survive by landing in a nearby swimming pool and swimming to safety. From their vantage point, they saw the devastated remains of Miami below them. Uncertain of their next steps, they received instructions from a colonel who informed them that the city had been overrun by the white spikes and was slated for bombing. Their new mission: rescue a stranded research team in a nearby laboratory. Due to Dan's military experience, the colonel appointed him as the team leader. Dan guided them through the rubble-strewn streets of the city, navigating carefully to avoid danger. Upon reaching the lab, they encountered a dead alien, and Dorian took one of its claws as a grim trophy. Inside, they found the research team massacred in an ambush by the aliens. With urgency mounting, the colonel ordered them to retrieve all critical research data swiftly, cautioning that the presence of bodies could attract more white spikes and that air support was on its way. The team swiftly gathered the vital documents and silently descended the stairs to evade detection. As they attempted a stealthy escape, a team member heard a noise above them, revealing the white spikes for the first time. An alien fired a spike from its tentacles, fatally injuring a team member and sparking immediate gunfire from the squad. Their bullets, however, proved ineffective against the alien's tough hide, only slowing them briefly as the team hurried down the stairs toward an exit. Despite their efforts, the aliens continued their relentless assault, capturing and killing several team members. Dan held the rear, switching to a fire axe when bullets failed, but even that was ineffective. In a crucial moment, Dorian stepped in, targeting the aliens' vulnerable spots and managing to slay it. With more white spikes closing in, the team raced through the streets towards a waiting rescue tank. Tragically, the aliens reached the tank first and destroyed it, leaving the team to fend for themselves while seeking cover. As the survivors dwindled under the unyielding alien onslaught, they scrambled into a nearby tunnel. Dan paused to help a fallen team member, causing a delay that led two others to bravely hold off the pursuing aliens, sacrificing themselves to buy time for the rest to escape. Just then, jets arrived and bombarded the area extensively. Hours later, Dan and Charlie regained consciousness at a forward operating base in the Dominican Republic. They were reunited with Dorian, who sadly reported the loss of the rest of the team. Dorian criticized Dan for risking the group's safety to assist the fallen team member. He also revealed his battle with cancer, showing a steadfast determination to face his own fate on his terms. Their conversation abruptly paused as Dan was called to meet with the colonel. Hearing someone address her by her last name, Dan was shocked to discover that the colonel was actually Maury, his daughter, now a scientist and leader of the Air Force initiative she had founded. Maury maintained a professional and distant demeanor, emphasizing that she hadn't brought Dan there for a family reunion, but because she needed his expertise. She showed him footage of a unique white spike, noticeably different from the ones encountered earlier. They were all male, but this one was female. This female white spike was more aggressive and rare, nesting underground. The males were fiercely protective of her because the survival of their species depended on her safety. The military had been using bombs containing a toxin developed by Maury to eliminate the males effectively. However, this particular female had survived the toxin, prompting Maury to enlist Dan in a mission to capture her for study. Their goal was to develop a more potent toxin, targeting the alien's primary reproductive source. The team quickly prepared and departed in helicopters, during which Maury explained how the white spikes had emerged unexpectedly in Russia in 2048, evading global detection by satellites and radar. Within 3 years, they had spread across the planet, driven not by material gain, but by a primal urge to consume humans. Curious about his own background, Dan asked Maury about his past, but she cautioned against delving into those memories, suggesting it might be better to leave them unexplored. Moments after arriving at the white spike nest, Dan and the team witnessed a chaotic scene as soldiers struggled to contain a furious female white spike. The alien attacked viciously, causing casualties among the soldiers. Maury joined the battle, landing a crucial shot to the alien's neck, allowing the team to secure her with ropes and prevent her from escaping. However, the trapped female emitted a distress call, drawing a swarm of protective male white spikes. As they closed in, Dan intervened, firing at the approaching aliens to protect Maury and the team. They managed to cage the female and load her onto a helicopter, but the male white spikes fiercely tried to rescue her, resulting in one helicopter crashing. Dan and Maury dashed to a jeep, providing cover fire for the remaining helicopters as they escaped with the caged female. They drove at high speed, eventually stopping at a beach to signal for help with an SOS flare. There, Maury confronted Dan about his reckless actions, expressing doubt about his protective instincts. She revealed painful truths. Dan had left the family when she was 12 due to depression from unfulfilled career aspirations. She recounted the devastating loss of Dan in a car accident when he was 16, an event that deeply scarred her. Reflecting on his actions and their impact, Dan began to understand the emotional toll of war that his own father, James, had once described. Meanwhile, the captured female, White Spike, was transported to a secure offshore oil platform housing the time machine. She was heavily sedated and securely chained. During their time on the platform, Dan and Maury collaborated on analyzing the alien's DNA to understand her resistance to the toxin. Their intensive work not only advanced their research but also fostered a healing bond between them. They spent days sharing meals and conversations, gradually repairing their strained relationship. On the eve of Dan's departure, he expressed his pride in Maury and assured her that her mother would have been equally proud of her achievements. Seeing how exhausted Maury had become from their intense work, Dan insisted she rest and offered to shoulder more responsibilities. He reassured her that he was there to support her, recognizing the importance of their renewed connection. In a pivotal moment, Murray reveals her plan to Dan. She has developed a potent toxin crucial for humanity's defense against the alien invasion, which must be taken back to the past for mass production. Determined to complete her work before Dan's departure, they succeed in perfecting the toxin just as the female white spike awakens and summons male aliens to attack the platform. Amidst the chaos, Dan suggests eliminating the female white spike to halt the onslaught, but Murray insists they preserve the toxin sample for the past. As they defend the platform from relentless alien assaults, they make a desperate dash to the helipad for Dan's imminent time jump. During the fierce battle, Murray is wounded by a white spike, causing intense pain and endangering their escape. In a moment of vulnerability, Murray apologizes for her earlier detachment, confesses her love for Dan, and entrusts him with the toxin, urging him to return and save humanity. Before they can flee, an alien grabs Murray, pulling her down just as the time machine activates, whisking Dan, Dorian, Charlie, and the team back to the past. Miraculously, the toxin remains intact in Dan's hand, offering hope for their mission. However, upon their return, they confront a harsh reality. The time machine is malfunctioning, likely damaged during the chaotic events at the oil platform. Now faced with a race against time and uncertain technology, Dan and the team must find a way to repair the time machine and ensure the toxin reaches the future to combat the alien threat. With no way to return to the future, Dan comes to terms with the gravity of their situation. It seems all hope is lost. Returning home, he finds solace and surreal comfort in being reunited with his family, though he struggles to process the harrowing events he experienced. Nights are especially difficult. Plagued by restlessness, Dan frequently checks on Murray, seeking reassurance of her safety. During one of these restless nights, Emmy discovers Dan and listens attentively as he recounts his experiences, particularly his interactions with the older Murray. Driven by a desperate need to unravel the crisis, Dan and Emmy collaborate to piece together the information they have gathered. The aliens' initial known attack in Russia in 2048 occurred without any observed arrival, suggesting they may have landed unnoticed in a remote, icy region. Determined to uncover more, Dan seeks out Dorian the following day, persuading him that their mission is far from over. They bring Dorian's trophy, a claw from an alien, to Charlie's laboratory for analysis. Charlie discovers residues on the claw, resembling volcanic ash from China or Korea, raising questions about how it could have ended up in Russia. Dan then turns to his student Martin, an enthusiastic young geologist, for insights. Martin proposes a theory about a significant volcanic eruption in Asia thousands of years ago. He suggests that volcanic ash could have been carried by wind currents, eventually settling in Russian waters, where it became trapped in ice. This revelation leads them to a startling realization. The aliens have been on Earth for millennia, dormant in ice. Their emergence in 2048 coincided with the accelerated melting of polar ice due to climate change, explaining the absence of any observable arrivals by sea or air. Dan and his team develop a compelling theory about the alien invasion, but face a significant setback when the government refuses to allocate resources to investigate the alien nest without concrete evidence. Undeterred, Dan decides to pursue the mission through unofficial channels. He turns to his father, James, who has been living off-grid and has access to his own aircraft. A simple plea, "I need your help," is enough to convince James to join Dan on this seemingly outlandish quest. Dan also reconnects with Hart, who had collaborated with Murray in the future and is committed to continuing her crucial work. Hart gathers several soldiers, a cache of weapons, and additional samples of the toxin to contribute to the mission. Together, they set course for Russia, with Charlie resolved not to shy away from danger this time. Arriving at the Academy of Sciences glacier, they meticulously scour the area for anomalies. Their search is abruptly halted when their equipment begins malfunctioning due to an unusual magnetic field. Armed with explosives, the team blasts open the ice, revealing an entrance to an ancient cavern beneath. Inside the cavern, they make a stunning discovery, a long-frozen spaceship of alien origin. Despite Dan's warnings about the potential dangers of entering, the team decides against seeking immediate governmental assistance, citing past ineffectiveness. Driven by their determination to take matters into their own hands, they prepare to explore the alien ship and face whatever challenges await inside. Using a chainsaw, the team cuts through the ice to access the spaceship, leaving Charlie and James outside as a precaution. Inside, they navigate to the cockpit and make a startling discovery. Earth was never the intended destination. This was a crash site. To their surprise, the pilot's corpse is not a white spike. Their exploration leads them to another chamber filled with biopods containing actual white spikes. The team realizes these creatures are bioengineered weapons used by the pilot's species for planetary colonization. Acting swiftly, they inject the biopods with the toxin, causing the white spikes inside to writhe in agony and perish. However, the commotion awakens the remaining aliens, who break free from their pods and launch an aggressive counterattack. The team responds with gunfire, managing to eliminate many, but some white spikes escape their confinement. Faced with overwhelming odds, Dorian decides their only option is to destroy the ship. He passes Dan his collected claw and stays behind to detonate a bomb, ensuring the others can escape. Outside, James engages the escaping aliens with gunfire, while Charlie, whose weapon jams, uses the chainsaw to defend himself. Dan and the others flee the exploding ship as Hart and the remaining team members battle the alien swarm. Unable to delay any longer, Dorian triggers the explosion, sacrificing himself to eliminate the aliens on his terms. Dan, Charlie, and James narrowly escape the cavern before the blast engulfs it. As they catch their breath outside, James spots the escaping female alien with a distinctive red belly, the Queen. The team splits up to pursue her. James uses a clever decoy, dressing a snowman, to divert her attention. When she targets the decoy, Dan intervenes, ramming her with his snowmobile, incapacitating her momentarily. Father and son stand united, firing their weapons together as they push the Queen to the edge of a cliff. They know the battle isn't over yet, anticipating her relentless return. Sure enough, the Queen launches another assault, aiming to separate them. In the chaos, she fires a spike at Dan, wounding him before aggressively pursuing him. Using the spike embedded in his own body, Dan turns the tables, thrusting it into the Queen's mouth. Seizing the moment, James strikes her with an axe, blinding her temporarily. In her panicked state, the Queen thrashes wildly, allowing Dan to inject the toxin into her leg. Astonishingly, the Queen amputates her own leg to contain the toxin's spread. Refocusing her fury on Dan, the Queen prepares for another attack. Dan prepares a grenade, ready to sacrifice himself to defeat her. Just as he's about to act, James intervenes, capturing the Queen's attention with his bloodied hand. Determined to protect his father after their recent reunion, Dan seizes the opportunity, leaping onto the Queen. With Dorian's claw, he slashes through her neck, decisively ending the threat once and for all. After delivering several decisive blows, Dan retrieves the final vial of toxin and forcefully administers it into the Queen's mouth. A powerful kick sends her tumbling down the cliff once more, where she collides with a large rock, meeting her demise. The next day, news reports worldwide cover an explosion in Russia that wiped out a significant number of aliens, with governments swiftly claiming credit for the victory. Dan returns home and celebrates his reunion with his family. This homecoming marks the first meeting between James and his granddaughter. Together, the family embraces the prospect of a brighter future, strengthened by their shared trials and newfound unity.